This is Yakuza Kiwami. This is the first entry in the series, but you're like, oh, well, I just played Yakuza 0. That was actually a prequel, and this is the first game, well, officially, in a very long-running action brawler series. It's a very interesting title, and we are on Xbox One X. It is apparently not enhanced, but it does visually look fairly impressive to the point that I think it might, but I do see some little jagged edges that necessarily kind of lean into that aspect of it actually not being enhanced, but perhaps boosted just a little bit, like was the case with 0. So yeah, in this game, you're basically going through a fairly heavy narrative-driven segment. This is just kind of the beginning of the fourth chapter in the game. This one follows Kiro-san, and I hope I got that closer to what is the correct way to say it, because I know people were giving me some flack last time for that, but try my best, Kiro-san. And yeah, it deals with deceit, and you're coming back into the picture after basically being gone for a decade, and you're trying to get the gist of what's happening. Technology's changed, people are interacting differently. You're not the fabled warrior legend that you were coming off of, you know, kind of the start of the game. You're like a super high level kind of guy, and then you go back to basics as you regrow your techniques and your abilities. So we see that here as we pull up the kind of abilities list. You work through these with the skill points it unlocks you do, and they give you new abilities and new powers, such as boosted health, new strengths, new ways to kind of fight and combat. There are obviously abilities, equipment. You have a cell phone for chatting with people. And I picked this spot in particular of the game, just gameplay wise, to do this, because it's one where I don't necessarily think it's going to really spoil any aspects of the story, because this one is kind of really interesting, just going into that sort of concept of betrayal and deceit and all these other mixtures of little things going on, just the characters you meet, the places you go, and sort of what happens. So this one is heavily narrative driven, tons and tons of cutscenes and dialogue and stuff, especially kind of right at the start of the game. So just be prepared for that when you do get into it, and then you get to more of a slightly open world sort of perspective. That's the part we're at now, where we have more of a freedom to move through the city. So we can't seem to zoom out right now. I guess we're in a fight. We'll show that in a sec here after we finish these guys off. So I'm playing on easy, just because the game, it can be quite difficult. I don't think there's anything wrong with being on easy difficulty. If you're playing normal, you're having troubles, it does give you the option to switch to easy temporarily if you'd like to do that. And I think that's a great choice to have, because I think you should be able to experience this even if you're, you know, not quite able to handle the difficulty aspect of that. And yeah, it's just more fun. I played this before on PS4 back in the day when it was first releasing, so it's actually been quite a long time. This was my first go at the series. I think it was this or Kiwami 2. I believe it was this one. And it's great to see it finally release on Xbox, and we're supposed to be seeing the additional ones down the line, and I'll be covering each of them because they're great games. Seriously, this is fantastic. It's really well done. So we get the full kind of city, but again, a little bit different than 0, obviously. Different time, different place, and everything like that. So what's really cool about the series is you can also, well, you can save in these machines, but you can also go into various stores, and they're full of depth and detail. And the world itself actually feels quite crowded. It feels very lively. And this one actually does seem to render a bit better than 0 did even. I thought 0 was generally running fine. I didn't really have any issues with 0 in terms of performance, but you know, there was like bits of pop-in in the world and stuff like that, some little visual little hiccups in that, which again do not at all detract from that great game, and you should definitely check it out. That's not to say you have to check that one out in order to experience this one. I think you can jump in here if you miss 0, but I do suggest, you know, giving 0 a whirl, especially if you play this one. You'll be like, oh, I kind of like this, because 0 really does help, you know, build out the characters, build out the world, and I think it's a well worth time to play that game, just because I think it is really well done. So yeah, like I was saying, little tiny bits of popping sometimes along the bikes. You see some of the shadows, but for the most part, this runs, quite well. It looks really good, and it handles quite well too. So in the game, aside from doing the main narrative, which we haven't jumped into, there are all these like little side things you can do. So you're seeing I'm using Rush. There's actually a few abilities, so we could like do the Beast, and that kind of just changes your fight style in the game. And I think that aspect's interesting, that you can kind of change that on the fly. I think that's really neat. So we'll do the Brawler one, just to kind of show off each of these, just so you get an idea of the different combative abilities that are present in the game. So I was just waiting for a number of fight sequences to actually show this off. But easier, it's a lot faster. These guys are also simpler ones. My main issue for difficulty-wise is less about the actual challenge and more about the fact that some of the big bad guys are like super spongy, and yeah, it's just kind of like tiring almost to deal with, quite honestly. And that makes the fighting a little bit repetitive, which is a bit disappointing, because I do find the combat and the style of the game to be very interesting. So I'm trying to find a store to kind of show off that aspect I was talking about. But performance-wise, the world runs very well. It looks really good. I'm very pleased with the aesthetics. But yeah, one aspect I just love about the game, and I want to show that off here, is the fact that there's so much detail within these stores, like all these shells and stuff going on. You can buy stuff, you can get food, and I think that's kind of really cool, in my opinion. Just the fact that this is a world that feels alive, it feels intense, and you do go to other areas. You're not just in the section. I also wanted to mention that the loading, great, all runs very smoothly, very quickly. Very impressed with that. So it's technically a very sound and very well developed game, with pretty good density when it comes to the actual people that are just running around on the streets doing their things. And you can play this. You can do the story, which is told through cinematics. It's told through in-game cinematics, like there's kind of like movie type cinematics that you would watch, and then in-game ones. And then there's also regular story that's kind of told as you're going along the way and playing. So I think that's kind of cool, and you do get like a really good sense of scale within it, seeing just kind of how it's loading. And that's why I'm running around the main town here, is because I don't want to necessarily spoil story aspects. I think that's kind of a good part of showing off the game without actually wrecking any actual aspects of the experience, and that's why I picked this particular part to showcase things. So it is quite a long game. I think there's like a good finisher I can do if I knock these guys down. You can also like pick up objects to fight with, which is kind of a neat thing, and they've got so much abilities, and they break, and you can kind of enhance that as you get new abilities on the ability wheel. But yeah, it's also got a really interesting story, one of like mystery and so much action, and there's like such a fun like it's serious. It's a very serious game that people might not tell you about, but at the heart of it, it's kind of a goofy little fun series that doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time there is that like heavy narrative, dramatic, with loyalty and everything like that, not hidden at the background, but very much there, that you might not think about with the series. So when I say like goofy and stuff, there's some like hilarious side missions and side quests that you can do within the world as you're just kind of going around. So there's mini games you can play. There's an arcade store, which is like Club Sega, which I guess we'll head over to slowly but steadily. But yeah, it's just got some really funny moments. There's a lot of jokes in the story too. A lot of things that just aren't at all serious. Like it opens up with you trying to get a ring, and somebody steals your ring, and you have to try to find the guy, and then the one guy is like buying things, and there's just sort of like this hilarious combination of things that are going on that you're just kind of like dealing with. That's just part of what it is, and I think that's kind of funny. I don't think we need to go in there, but it's such a world that is intriguing and something that is fun to play. Oh, we're getting a call here. So this is like one of the in-game serious things. Yeah, no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. And I think it really is kind of cool. Oh, and there's a little bit of like a choice in the game too. Like you do get to kind of pick, the direction and where things go. Would it be West Park by chance? Okay, that's fun. Yeah, so like I said, you kind of actually get to make some choices within the story. They don't directly impact the overall status of what's going on or what's happening. And I think that's interesting. Oh, this is like a sub-story in the game, so like a side mission that you could do. But I just want to get that across, that it's kind of like, it's a set narrative, but you kind of get to impact it in little tiny ways as it goes along. And I think that's kind of a fun participation aspect of play, and I think that's really cool. So then we got lots of interesting characters and kind of action and sequences that you can kind of enjoy. I mean, it is also a bit of a mature title just in terms of like the content within it. I don't think it's too bad. You can also change some of the action options in the actual settings. Kind of show that off now, just like gore levels and stuff like that, and the subtitles on and off. So I think that's kind of nice. That's easy to save, easy to play the game, and just generally fun. So I think we're actually going to do a little bit of more fighting, and then we're going to start a little bit of the narrative so that you can actually get an idea of what that is like in action as we kind of progress forward. And hopefully there's no context to it so that you're a little bit, you know, at least surprised as to what's happening. But I don't think anything at this point will spoil anything for you. But yeah, it's just a great game with lots of cool action. Play it however you'd like. Again, I feel that it's a little bit too spongy. You can totally make that decision up yourself as you play the actual game, because I know that some people, they're like, oh, you know, whatever, I like that challenge. Totally up to you, that's fine. I don't care, I don't judge about that aspect of it, especially in this series. I just find it more fun just to kind of be a little bit more technically able to kind of brawl and take on enemies. I think that's kind of cool. So the game also has a very clear, precise sort of interface and experience to it. You can clearly see your health, your stamina. As you build your like heat, and you're able to actually take down enemies in more efficient ways. I think, yeah, I totally missed the Sega Center. Oh no, Sega's right here. Sega. Yeah, it's just kind of like a fun area where you can play games. Where are you, Club Sega? There you are. I think we can jump in here, maybe. Might be closed, or I might be going to the wrong part of it. No, I'm probably not going to the front of it. But let's just, we'll go kickstart the mission thing here so we can show off a bit of that. But I'm just wanting to show off this being kind of like the open world aspect of it. We're getting chased by Majima. That guy's kind of annoying, but he's a cool, fun element of play. How boring? Yeah, I know, we're the most boring sort of guy that you got to deal with. You're noticing the pauses. I'm just checking to make sure that the DVR is rolling, because, you know, recording and stuff like that. But the game seriously does run so smoothly. It looks great. We're going into something a little bit narrative. We might not watch the whole thing. We might jump ahead, because keep in mind, I've seen all this before. I've played it, but it's been a long time. But seriously, they've got great story aspects told through these more natural movie-like cinematics, and then they've got more like in-game ones, which I think are also interesting. And I think this title does actually hold up quite well, just in terms of the design and even the remake itself, because you got to remember that this remake released a very long time ago. So even that remake is kind of a testament to the work that they did there. And I think that's kind of really interesting, just in terms of, well, this is actually going to be really good for kind of setting up a bit of a mystery, because you have no context, most likely, into any of these people, aside from our lead there. But you get just like the design, and this engine has obviously done wonders in terms of making this series look really good, because you got to remember, this is a remake of like a really old classic kind of title, and it just absolutely shines here, and it keeps the heart of the original entry quite alive, and I think, you know, very well done in a way that this series can be continuously introduced to new fans as they continue to release them, because you might not have even heard of the franchise or even have an idea of what Yakuza is at this point. And you could jump in on this one after seeing it and being like, okay, yeah, I'm into this. Or you can be like, oh, I'm into this and I want to see where it all starts. And Yakuza 0 is a prequel, but it's a really good way to kind of kickstart it. And I want to really mention that because they just released recently. And I know we're going to see the other titles kind of come afterwards. And I think it might be a good idea, if you have been curious about the series, to get into it now, because the amount of game time, because you get so many hours of gameplay out of these, now would be a good time to basically start or get to it. I mean, you can wait till they're all released, but then that's just like tons and tons of gameplay time. But there's never been a better time to actually get in here. So basically, for the gist of the story, we've kind of been talking about the mystery of it. Kind of taking this long kind of trip away due to situations that happened, coming back, starting from scratch, working your way up, doing weird fun mini games, or meeting the weird characters, doing the narrative, doing side missions if that's your sort of thing. You can just fool around in here for hours and hours on top of the main hours of the actual story that's present. Having to deal with the disappearance of all this family cash, a war within this district, a mysterious individual coming into the picture, trying to figure out what happened, getting your, kind of bearing within this completely changed world, and having fun doing it, because this is just such an enticing and unique sort of universe that they've created here. It's such a neat concept, and I'm really happy to keep checking it out, keep being able to play it, because because it is so much fun and it's got such rich characters. It's almost overwhelming dealing with the quantity of characters that are present within this game, as it's always a bit of a shock. So this guy's actually, he's a hard guy to deal with, but he's kind of a big friend, I guess you could say. He's kind of a big character in the series, just in regards to being known. You kind of interacting with him, you'll run into him a lot. He's kind of like a full world sort of character that you're gonna just keep running into and having to interact with. Sometimes he kind of really is interested in fights, which is kind of weird, but definitely one to know. And there's a couple of the family branches that you'll kind of interact with, and I love that aspect of the game where it's just like a big flashing thing that says this guy, and it's like, oh, okay, cool, and is introduced to them, and it's all over the top. But that's actually, I think, one aspect that I think really holds well, is this type of game, I guess, history. I consider it usually to have a very exaggerated style of gameplay, but they don't go too over the top here, despite being very intensely honor bound, which I think is interesting to see this character that's got these morals trying to deal with a not so easy kind of job, well, it's not really a job, but goal in life and objective and what he's got to do. We can see how this guy's a little bit more spongy, and some guys are even more. They got double, triple health bars and stuff, which is kind of ridiculous, and it takes quite a while to deal with. You do get cool moves, and I mean, you can string them together better than I've been stringing them together, but I'm just kind of getting through this so that I can continue progressing forward, and just enjoying playing this game again. It's surprisingly, just so well done, so interesting. It's got a great sense of scale to it, a world that runs so well on this platform. I am seriously impressed with this one, even more so than 0. And I thought 0 was a really, really good release, and I can't stop talking about it because, I don't know, it's just really good. They're all really fun games. They've all got that silly little goofy angle behind them, but then they've also got, this sort of serious, almost dark aspect that I think kind of carries them, and I think that makes them interesting. Oh, you're always being tracked for stats too, if you haven't noticed that. Just extra bonuses and things that kind of build into your character as you level up and become more of the true dragon again. So yeah, it's just been great to come back to this and kind of keep showcasing what the game is. Hopefully giving you an idea of what to expect if you actually do come in here and try to take in this this world, the weird fights, and you can skip all these fights. You don't actually need to do them, but I hope this has given you a good idea of what to actually expect if you are jumping in this and giving it a whirl.